The blood on her hands had already dried by the time Gemma Lyndon crashed through the gilded doors of the Vampire King's court, and she didn't care that she was screaming his name like a curse. "Gideon Winterbourne!" Her voice echoed through the cavernous throne room, all marble columns and vaulted ceilings that belonged in a cathedral not buried 3 stories beneath the financial district of downtown Manhattan. "I know you're here. I know what you are." She'd expected guards to tackle her, expected to be torn apart before she made it 10 steps across the polished floor. Instead, silence greeted her. Then, from the shadows near the dais at the far end of the hall, a figure stepped into the light. He was nothing like the monster she'd imagined during her frantic research over the past 6 hours. White hair fell past his shoulders, catching the glow from the chandeliers overhead like spun silver. His skin held that same pale luminescence, smooth and ageless, and when he regarded her with eyes the color of winter frost, Gemma felt the air leave her lungs. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, modern and impeccable, but something about the way he carried himself whispered of centuries, of old-world courts and ancient power. "You've come a long way to shout at me," he said, and his voice was warm, almost amused. "Though I confess, most supplicants begin with Your Majesty rather than my given name." Gemma's hands curled into fists. "My sister is dying." The amusement faded from his expression. He descended the 3 steps from his throne with fluid grace, closing the distance between them until he stood perhaps 15 feet away, close enough that she could see the sharp planes of his face, the way his lips pressed into a thoughtful line. "Tell me," he said simply. The words tumbled out of her in a rush. "Her name is Grace. She's 19. She was walking home from her evening class 3 nights ago when someone attacked her in the parking garage beneath her building. She made it to her apartment, called me. By the time I got there, she was burning up with fever. The wound on her neck wouldn't stop bleeding. I took her to the hospital, but they can't figure out what's wrong. Every test comes back normal, but she's getting worse. She's delirious now, and her heart keeps stopping and starting, and—" Her voice cracked. "The paramedic who brought her in, he pulled me aside, told me he'd seen this before, years ago. He said there were stories about a cure, but I'd have to find you." Gideon regarded her steadily. "The paramedic was brave to tell you that, or foolish. Is it true?" Gemma took a step forward. "Can you save her?" "Yes." Relief nearly drove her to her knees. "Then please, please, I'll do anything. I'll pay anything you want. Sign anything, I don't care. Just save my sister." He moved closer, and she realized he was tall, at least 6'3", broad-shouldered beneath that elegant suit. He should have been intimidating, but his expression held only careful consideration. "I believe you would," he said quietly. "And I will help her, Gemma Lyndon. But you need to understand what you're asking for. I'm asking you to cure my sister. You're asking for a transfusion of my blood, specifically ancient blood. King's blood, powerful enough to burn out the venom left by whoever fed from her." His voice remained gentle but firm. "That blood is bound by laws older than your country, older than most countries. I cannot simply give it away." Gemma's heart hammered against her ribs. "What do you want?" "It's not about want," Gideon said, and something that might have been regret flickered across his face. "The blood law is absolute. To share blood of this potency with a human requires a bond of belonging. The recipient must belong to the giver, body and soul, bound by oath and intention. Without that bond, the blood would kill her rather than cure her." The room tilted. "Belong to you? You mean like property?" "The old words translate poorly into modern English," he admitted. "The bond requires commitment, loyalty, allegiance. A place at my side, under my protection. It's the only way the magic will accept the transfusion. So I'd be your servant. You'd be mine," he corrected, then added, "and I would be yours in equal measure. That's how the bond functions. But yes, in the eyes of vampire law, you would belong to me, and I would be responsible for you in all ways." Gemma wanted to laugh or scream, or both. "That's insane." "It's ancient." Gideon's expression held sympathy. "I don't expect you to agree immediately. Take time to think. How much time does my sister have? He hesitated. Based on what you've described, perhaps 48 hours, maybe less. Then I don't need time. The words came out hard and fast. I agree. To whatever you need. Just save Grace. Gideon studied her face for a long moment. You love her very much. She's my sister. She's all the family I have left. Gemma met his frost-pale eyes without flinching. So yes, I agree. I'll belong to you. I'll swear whatever oath you require. Just please, help her before it's too late. He moved then, closing the final distance between them, and reached out to take her hand. His touch was cool but not cold, his fingers surprisingly gentle as they curled around hers. Then I accept your oath, Gemma Lyndon, and I will honor it with everything I am. His voice dropped to something almost reverent. Take me to your sister. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Grace lay in the bed, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped and hummed, tracking vital signs that grew weaker by the hour. Her blonde hair, so like Gemma's, was plastered to her forehead with sweat. Her skin had taken on a grayish tinge that made Gemma's stomach clench every time she looked. Gideon swept into the room with an authority that made the night nurse simply step aside. He'd wrapped himself in a long black coat and pulled a wide-brimmed hat low over his face before they'd left his underground court. The streets above had still been dark, with dawn still 3 hours away, but he'd explained that even reflected streetlight could cause discomfort. Now he shed the coat and approached Grace's bedside with careful deliberation. Gemma hovered at his elbow, torn between hope and terror. The wound, Gideon said quietly. May I see it? Gemma pulled back the hospital gown to reveal the bandage on Grace's neck. The nurses had changed it an hour ago, but already fresh blood had seeped through the gauze. Gideon leaned closer, his nostrils flaring slightly. When he straightened, his expression had gone hard. This wasn't a random feeding. What do you mean? The vampire who did this knew exactly what they were doing. They injected venom, but not enough to turn her. Just enough to poison her, slowly. His jaw tightened. This was a message. Gemma's blood ran cold. A message to who? To me. He turned to face her fully. Only someone from my direct bloodline could create a reaction like this, and only one of my bloodline would dare harm a human within my territory as a challenge. I don't understand. You will, but first we save your sister. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a forearm corded with lean muscle. The oath, Gemma. I need you to speak it. Her throat felt tight. What do I say? Repeat after me. His eyes found hers, and she saw something ancient stirring in their depths. I, Gemma Lyndon, of my own free will and sound mind, pledge myself to Gideon Winterbourne, King of the Eastern Territories, Lord of the First Line. I offer my loyalty, my allegiance, my bond. I accept his protection and his authority. I belong to him, as he belongs to me, until one of us turns to dust. The words felt heavy on her tongue, weighted with power she didn't fully understand, but she spoke them anyway, clearly and firmly, watching his face as she did. Something flickered in his expression when she reached the final phrase, something almost like surprise. Until one of us turns to dust, she finished. The air between them seemed to shimmer. Gemma felt it in her chest, a sudden pull, like a thread had been tied around her heart and anchored to his. She gasped. The bond is made, Gideon said softly. Then he produced a small knife from his pocket, drew the blade across his palm, and held his bleeding hand over Grace's parted lips. His blood was darker than human blood, almost black in the fluorescent lighting. It dripped onto Grace's tongue, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then Grace's entire body convulsed. The machine screamed alarms. Gemma lunged forward, but Gideon caught her with his free arm. Wait, he commanded. This is normal. The blood is fighting the venom. Grace convulsed again, her back arching off the bed. The wound on her neck began to smoke, actually smoke, like acid on metal. Gemma watched in horror as black lines appeared beneath her sister's skin, spreading out from the wound like a web. Gideon, Wait. The black lines pulsed once, twice. Then they began to recede, pulling back toward the wound. The smoking intensified for just a moment and then stopped. Grace went limp against the pillows. The machines continued to shriek until Gideon reached over and silenced them one by one. Then he placed his uncut hand over Grace's heart and closed his eyes. "Her heartbeat is strengthening," he said after a moment. "The fever is breaking. She'll sleep for several hours, but when she wakes, she'll be fully healed." Gemma stared at her sister's face. Already the grayish tinge was fading, replaced by the healthy pink of normal circulation. Grace's breathing had evened out, no longer the shallow, ragged gasps of before. "She's really going to be okay?" Gemma whispered. "She's really going to be okay," Gideon confirmed. He wrapped his hand in a handkerchief that immediately began to stain red, though the bleeding was already slowing. "But we need to talk, Gemma. We need to talk about what comes next." They left Grace sleeping peacefully under the watchful eye of a nurse who seemed completely unfazed by what she'd just witnessed. Gideon explained in a low voice that he'd had people in key positions throughout the city for decades and reconvened in an empty waiting room down the hall. Gemma sank into one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs and buried her face in her hands. The adrenaline that had been carrying her for the past 6 hours was finally draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. But beneath the exhaustion, she felt that strange pull in her chest, the awareness of Gideon even though her eyes were closed. He settled into the chair beside her rather than across from her. She felt his presence like a warm fire, steady and constant. "You felt the bond," he said. It wasn't a question. Is it always like that? No. Most bonds form slowly, over the course of days or weeks. Yours manifested immediately because your intention was so pure. You meant every word. Gemma looked up at him. "Of course I did. Grace is my whole world." His expression softened. "I know. I could feel it." "You can feel what I feel?" "To an extent. Strong emotions come through clearly, especially at first. As you learn to control your side of the bond, you'll be able to shield your thoughts and feelings if you wish." He paused. "But I'll always know if you're in danger, and you'll always be able to call me, even without words. That's the nature of the protection I've sworn." It should have felt invasive, suffocating. Instead, Gemma found it oddly comforting, like a safety net she hadn't known she needed. "You said the vampire who attacked Grace did it to send you a message," she said. "What kind of message?" Gideon's jaw tightened again, the way it had in Grace's hospital room. "I've ruled the Eastern Territories for 2 centuries. During that time, I've worked to modernize our laws, to reduce the harm we cause to humans. Many of my kind support these changes. But some—" He shook his head. "Some believe I've gone too far, that I've made us weak. There's been talk of a challenge to my rule." A challenge. An old tradition. Any vampire of sufficient age and power can invoke the right to single combat for the throne. If they win, they take my place as king. His eyes met hers. "The vampire who hurt Grace is named Constantine. He's nearly as old as I am. And he's been agitating for change among the traditionalist faction. This attack was his way of announcing his intentions." Gemma's hands clenched in her lap. "He hurt my sister just to pick a fight with you. He hurt your sister knowing that someone would tell you about the cure, knowing that you would come to me, knowing that I would either refuse you and seem cruel or accept your oath and give him ammunition to claim I'm seducing humans into servitude." Gideon's voice had gone cold. "He couldn't have predicted that you'd come so quickly or that your bond would form so perfectly. That part at least went in my favor." "Why does the bond matter?" "Because now you're under my protection, officially recognized by vampire law. If Constantine or any of his followers harm you, they'll be violating the oldest laws we have. Even the traditionalists won't stand for that." He reached over and took her hand, and Gemma found she didn't want to pull away. "But it also means you need to stay close to me until this is resolved. My court is the safest place for you." "Your court? You mean that underground palace beneath the city?" A small smile tugged at his lips. "It's not a palace. Just a very old, very well-protected building. The entrance you came through is one of 7 scattered across Manhattan. We've been here since the city was New Amsterdam. And you want me to just move in, live with you? I want you to survive, he corrected gently. Constantine won't stop with your sister. Now that you're mine, you're a target. He'll try to use you against me. The word mine should have rankled, should have made her want to argue. But the bond in her chest pulsed warm and steady, and she knew he was right. Okay, she said. But I need to be able to visit Grace, make sure she really recovers. Of course, I'll arrange for a security detail. Vampires? Some trusted humans. I employ both. He squeezed her hand. Gemma, I know this isn't what you imagined when you barged into my court tonight, but I promise you I will keep you safe, and I will deal with Constantine. She believed him. Maybe that was the bond talking, or maybe it was the way he looked at her, direct and honest, with none of the cruelty she'd expected from a vampire king. What happens now? She asked. Now you rest. When Grace wakes, you'll be there. After that, we go back to the court, and I teach you what you need to know about my world. He stood, pulling her gently to her feet. And then, I prepare for war, because that's what Constantine is bringing to my door. Gemma followed him out of the waiting room, acutely aware of his hand still wrapped around hers, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Grace woke at dawn, the rising sun painting gold across the hospital room floor. Gemma was there, holding her sister's hand, and when Grace's eyes fluttered open, clear and bright and free of fever, Gemma burst into tears. Gem? Grace's voice was raspy but strong. What happened? Why are you crying? You're okay. Gemma managed through her sobs. You're really okay. Grace tried to sit up, and Gemma helped her, adjusting the pillows. Grace's hand flew to her neck, touching the bandage there. I remember there was someone in the parking garage. He grabbed me, his teeth. She paled. Oh God, Gemma, he bit me. I'm not going crazy, am I? He actually bit me. You're not crazy. Gemma wiped her eyes. Grace, there's a lot I need to explain. She told her sister everything, watching Grace's expression cycle through disbelief, shock, and finally acceptance. To her credit, Grace didn't interrupt, didn't call Gemma insane. She just listened, occasionally touching the bandage on her neck as if to remind herself this was real. So, vampires exist, Grace said when Gemma finished, and you pledged yourself to their king to save my life. Yes. And now you're basically his, what? Girlfriend? Servant? I don't know what I am, Gemma admitted. But I'm alive, and you're alive, and that's what matters. Grace reached out and took both of Gemma's hands in hers. You saved my life. You always do. Ever since Mom and Dad died, you've been the one taking care of me. But Gem, her voice wavered. What if you just traded your freedom for my life? What if this vampire king is using you? He's not. The certainty in her voice surprised them both. I know how it sounds, but Grace, he was kind. He explained everything. He didn't force me. He didn't manipulate me. And when he saved you, I could feel how much it mattered to him to get it right. You could feel it? The bond. It lets me sense things about him. Gemma squeezed her sister's hands. I know you're worried. I'm worried too. But I also think maybe he's not the monster we'd expect a vampire king to be. Grace studied her face for a long moment. Then she said, You like him. I barely know him. But you like him, Grace pressed. I can see it in your face. Gemma started to deny it, then stopped. Was it true? She'd spent all of 6 hours in Gideon's presence, most of that time consumed by fear for Grace. But she remembered the way he'd looked at her when she spoke the oath, the gentleness in his hands when he'd treated Grace, the honesty in his voice when he'd explained about Constantine and the danger she now faced. Maybe, she admitted quietly. Is that insane? Probably. Grace managed a weak smile. But so is everything else about this situation, so why not? Her smile faded. Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't let him hurt you. I promise. A knock at the door interrupted them. Gideon entered, still wearing his hat and coat despite the hospital's warmth. He'd clearly been waiting nearby. Grace, he said, inclining his head in a gesture that was almost a bow. "I'm glad to see you awake and recovering." Grace stared at him, and Gemma saw her sister's eyes widen as she took in Gideon's appearance. Even concealed beneath the coat and hat, he was striking, impossible to ignore. "You're him," Grace said. "The Vampire King. Gideon Winterbourne," he confirmed. "And I owe you an apology. The vampire who harmed you did so because of his conflict with me. You were an innocent victim of our political struggles." "Gemma told me." Grace's voice was steadier now. "She also told me you saved my life. So, thank you. You owe me no thanks. I was honoring the oath your sister made." But his expression was warm, and Gemma saw genuine relief in his eyes. "How do you feel?" "Tired, confused, but better. The pain is gone." "Good. It will take a day or two for your strength to fully return, but you'll make a complete recovery." He glanced at Gemma. "I hate to intrude on your reunion, but we should leave soon. The sun is up, and I need to return to the court." Gemma nodded, then turned back to Grace. "I'll come visit tomorrow. The doctors said they want to keep you one more day for observation anyway." "You'll be safe?" Grace asked. "With him?" "She'll be safe," Gideon said before Gemma could answer. "You have my word, Grace Lyndon. I will protect your sister with everything I have." Something in his tone made Grace relax slightly. She nodded. "Okay. But Gemma, call me. Every day. I mean it." "Every day," Gemma promised. She hugged her sister carefully, mindful of the IV and monitors, and then followed Gideon out of the room. The car waiting for them outside was a sleek black sedan with windows tinted so dark they were almost opaque. A driver held the door open, and Gemma glimpsed him briefly, a tall man with bronze skin and warm brown eyes, decidedly human. "This is Marcus," Gideon said as they settled into the back seat. "He's been with me for 15 years. You can trust him." Marcus nodded to her in the rearview mirror. "Welcome to the madness, Miss Lyndon." Despite everything, Gemma found herself smiling. "Thanks, I think." The drive back to the court took 20 minutes, winding through Manhattan streets that were beginning to fill with morning traffic. Gideon kept the brim of his hat low, and Gemma noticed he angled himself away from even the tinted windows. "Does it hurt?" she asked quietly. "The sunlight?" "It's uncomfortable," he admitted. "Like standing too close to a fire. Not immediately dangerous through glass and tinting, but unpleasant. Direct sunlight, though." He shook his head. "That would kill me in minutes." "How does that work? I mean, you're dead, right? Or undead?" A smile flickered across his lips. "Technically undead. My heart beats, I breathe, I can eat and drink though I don't need to. But I'm sustained by blood, and the sun is anathema to my kind. No one knows exactly why. Some say it's a curse from God, others say it's simply biology. We're creatures of night and shadow. But you can go out during the day with protection. For short periods, yes. It's draining, though. Most of my kind simply sleep through the daylight hours." He glanced at her. "Does it bother you, knowing what I am?" Gemma considered the question honestly. "It should, probably, but no. I think I'm too tired to be bothered by anything right now." He laughed, a low, warm sound that made something flutter in Gemma's chest. "Fair enough. When we reach the court, I'll show you to your rooms. You can rest, eat, shower, whatever you need. Tonight, I'll give you a proper tour and introduce you to the inner circle." "The inner circle?" "My advisors and closest allies. They'll want to meet you." His expression turned serious. "Gemma, I want you to understand something. By accepting my oath, you've become important in vampire society. You're bonded to a king, which gives you status and protection, but also draws attention. Some of my people will be curious, some will be jealous, and some will try to use you as a way to curry favor. You'll need to be careful." The flutter in her chest turned into a knot. "I don't know how to navigate vampire politics." "I'll teach you," he said simply. "That's part of my responsibility to you. You're under my protection, yes, but you're also my partner in this bond. I won't leave you defenseless or ignorant. Partner. The word settled something in Gemma's mind. Not property, not servant, partner. "Okay," she said. "Teach me." His smile was approving. "We'll start tonight." The court was different in the early morning light, quieter, with fewer people moving through the halls. Gideon led Gemma through a maze of corridors, all decorated with a mix of modern elegance and Gothic antiquity. Tapestries hung alongside contemporary art. Marble floors gave way to plush carpets. Everything spoke of wealth accumulated over centuries. Her rooms were in the east wing, Gideon explained, close to his own chambers. He opened a door and ushered her inside, and Gemma stopped short. The suite was enormous. A sitting room decorated in shades of cream and gold led to a bedroom with a four-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. Beyond that, she glimpsed a bathroom with a tub large enough to swim in. "This is too much," she said. "This is appropriate," Gideon corrected. "You're bonded to the king. Your accommodations reflect that." He crossed to a closet and opened it, revealing shelves already stocked with clothes. "I had my staff prepare these. If nothing fits or suits your taste, let me know, and we'll arrange something else." Gemma ran her hand over a soft sweater. "You keep a wardrobe for unexpected guests?" "I keep a wardrobe for emergencies." He leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "Though I'll admit, I didn't expect to use it quite like this." She turned to face him. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you agree so quickly? When I came to you about Grace, you barely hesitated. You could have refused. You could have demanded more from me. Why didn't you?" Gideon was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because you reminded me why I've spent 2 centuries trying to change our laws. You came into my court terrified and desperate, but willing to sacrifice everything for someone you loved. That kind of courage, that kind of love. It's rare, Gemma. I wasn't going to punish you for it." Her throat felt tight. "I thought vampires were supposed to be heartless." "Some are. I've known vampires who've lived so long they've forgotten what it means to care about anything beyond their own power." He pushed off from the doorframe and walked toward her, stopping just within arm's reach. "But I'm not one of them. I've tried very hard not to be." "Why?" His eyes searched her face. "Because I remember being human. I remember what it felt like to love, to fear, to hope. I was turned against my will 263 years ago, and I swore that if I survived, I'd never let myself become the kind of monster who'd stolen my life." His voice dropped. "So when you came to me, begging for your sister's life, I saw an echo of my own humanity. I couldn't turn you away." Gemma's heart was pounding. The bond between them pulsed, carrying emotions she couldn't quite name. Sadness, yes, but also determination. Strength. And underneath it all, a loneliness so deep it made her ache. "You've been alone a long time," she said softly. He blinked, surprise flickering across his face. "You can feel that." "I can feel something. Like an empty room." She hesitated, then reached out and took his hand. His skin was cool under her fingers. "You don't have to be alone anymore, Gideon. Maybe that's part of what this bond means." For a moment, he just stared at their joined hands. Then he lifted his gaze to hers, and something raw and vulnerable shone in those frost-pale eyes. "Maybe," he said quietly. Then he stepped back, gently extracting his hand from hers. "Rest, Gemma. I need to attend to some matters, but I'll come find you this evening. If you need anything before then, tell any of the staff, and they'll help you." He left before she could respond, the door clicking softly shut behind him. Gemma stood in the middle of her new suite, her hand still tingling from his touch, and wondered what she was really feeling. The bond made it hard to separate her emotions from his, her growing fascination from whatever he might be feeling in return. She was too exhausted to figure it out now. Instead, she stripped off her blood-stained clothes, took a long, hot shower, and collapsed into the enormous bed. Within minutes, she was asleep. She woke to darkness and the sensation of being watched. Her eyes snapped open and she sat up quickly, her heart racing. Gideon stood near the window, backlit by the city lights filtering through the glass. He'd changed clothes, now wearing black trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His hair was loose around his shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I didn't mean to startle you. You'd slept past sunset, and I wanted to make sure you were all right." Gemma rubbed her eyes. "What time is it?" "Nearly 8. You slept for almost 10 hours. 10 hours? She scrambled out of bed, then realized she was wearing only the oversized t-shirt she'd found in the closet. Heat crept into her cheeks. "I didn't mean to sleep that long. Your body needed it. You've been through an ordeal." His eyes skated over her, then away, polite and controlled. "There's food in the sitting room if you're hungry. When you're ready, I'd like to show you the court and introduce you to some key people." "Give me 20 minutes, she said. He nodded and left, and Gemma hurried to make herself presentable. The clothes in the closet fit perfectly, which was slightly unnerving. She chose dark jeans and a forest green sweater, then spent a few minutes taming her hair and splashing water on her face. When she emerged into the sitting room, she found a tray waiting with fruit, cheese, bread, and a pot of tea. Gideon sat in one of the armchairs, reading something on a tablet. "You don't have to wait for me," she said, settling onto the couch and reaching for the tea. "I don't mind." He set the tablet aside. "How do you feel?" "Better. Still processing, but better." She sipped the tea and sighed. It was perfect, exactly the way she liked it. "How did you know I prefer Earl Grey with honey?" A faint smile. "The bond works both ways, remember? I can sense your preferences, just as you can sense my emotions. That's going to take some getting used to." "For both of us," he agreed. He watched her eat for a moment, then said, "I spoke to the hospital. Grace is doing well. They plan to discharge her tomorrow morning." Relief washed over Gemma. "That's wonderful. I've arranged for her to stay in a secured apartment, one of several I maintain for humans who work closely with the court. She'll have a security detail, and you'll be able to visit freely." "You're doing all this for Grace?" "I'm doing all this for you," Gideon corrected. "Your sister's safety is important to you, which makes it important to me. That's how the bond functions." Gemma set down her teacup. "You keep explaining the bond like it's just a magical contract, but it feels like more than that." "It is more than that," he admitted. "The magic creates a connection, but what we build on top of that connection is up to us. Some bonds remain purely functional, like a business arrangement. Others—" He trailed off. "Others what?" His eyes met hers. "Others become something deeper. Partnership, friendship, even love in rare cases." The word love hung in the air between them. Gemma's pulse quickened. "Is that what you want?" she asked quietly. "Something deeper?" Gideon was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "What I want is irrelevant. You didn't choose this bond because you wanted me. You chose it to save your sister. I won't take advantage of that by pushing you into something you're not ready for." "But if I were ready?" She had no idea where the courage to ask was coming from. Maybe the bond was making her brave. "What would you want then?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. "If you were ready, Gemma, I'd want everything. I've spent over 2 centuries alone, watching humans live and love and die while I remained apart. Do you know what it's like to see that kind of warmth and know you can never have it?" His voice dropped. "And then you walked into my court, fierce and desperate and alive, and I felt the bond snap into place like something I'd been waiting for my entire existence. So yes, if you were ready, I would want everything, but only if you wanted it too." Gemma couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she could do was feel the bond between them flaring bright and hot, carrying his loneliness, his hope, his desire, and underneath it all, his determination to let her choose. "I don't know what I want," she said honestly. "Everything is happening so fast, but I know I don't regret the oath I made, and I know that when I'm near you, I feel safe. That has to count for something." His expression softened. "It counts for everything." He stood and offered his hand. "Come, let me show you my world, and then you can decide if it's a world you want to be part of." She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. His fingers interlaced with hers, and the touch sent warmth spiraling through her. "I thought you were going to be terrible," she said as they headed for the door. Some cruel tyrant who'd make my life hell. Gideon glanced at her, amusement dancing in his eyes. I can still be terrible if you'd prefer. I have a throne room where I pass judgments. Very dramatic, lots of groveling. She laughed despite herself. I'll pass, thanks. Pity, I look very kingly when I'm being dramatic. The court came alive at night. Gemma walked beside Gideon through corridors now filled with vampires and tried not to stare. They were all beautiful in an otherworldly way, with pale skin and hair in shades of white, silver, and platinum blonde. They dressed in everything from modern designer clothes to garments that looked centuries old. Every single one of them stopped to bow when Gideon passed. More than a few gave Gemma curious looks. She felt their attention like a weight. Ignore them, Gideon murmured. They're just curious about the human who's bonded to their king. Is it really that unusual? Bonding to humans isn't unusual. Bonding to a human as king, that hasn't happened in over a century. He guided her into a large room that resembled a library, all dark wood and leather furniture. The last king before me kept a bonded human companion. She lived with him for 40 years before she died of old age. He mourned her for decades after. What happened to him? He eventually stepped down and passed the throne to me. Last I heard, he'd retreated to a fortress in the Scottish Highlands. Gideon led her to a cluster of chairs where 3 vampires waited. These are my closest advisors. The first vampire rose to greet her. She was tall and elegant, with white hair braided in an intricate crown around her head. Gemma Lyndon, she said, her voice melodic. I'm Seraphine. I oversee diplomatic relations with the other territories. Nice to meet you, Gemma managed. The second vampire was male, with silver hair and sharp features. Lucian, he said with a slight bow. I handle our financial interests. Also nice to meet you. The third vampire stayed seated, watching Gemma with pale eyes that were almost gold. He looked younger than the others, though Gemma knew that meant nothing when it came to vampires. Victor, he said simply. I'm in charge of security. Gideon rested his hand on the small of Gemma's back, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. These 3 know everything about our court and its operations. If you have questions about how our society functions, any of them can help you. Seraphine smiled. We're so pleased Gideon finally bonded. He's been alone far too long. Seraphine, Gideon said in a warning tone. What? It's true. She turned her attention back to Gemma. You have no idea how insufferable he's been for the past century. All work, no pleasure. It's made him positively grim. I'm standing right here, Gideon muttered. Lucian chuckled. She's not wrong, my lord. You have been rather intense lately. Victor, still seated, tilted his head. I'm more interested in discussing the Constantine problem. Have you told Gemma about the challenge? The warmth drained from the room. Gideon's hand pressed more firmly against Gemma's back. I've told her some, he said. But she deserves to know the full situation. Victor's golden eyes fixed on Gemma. Constantine has been planning this for months. He's been gathering support among the traditionalists, the vampires who think Gideon's reforms have made us weak. The attack on your sister was just the opening move. He's going to invoke formal challenge within the next few days. And then what happens? Gemma asked. Then Gideon and Constantine fight, Seraphine said quietly. To the death. Gemma's stomach dropped. She turned to Gideon. You're going to duel him? It's tradition. I can't refuse without losing the throne by default. His expression was calm, but she felt tension through the bond. Don't worry, Gemma. I've been fighting for over 2 centuries. I know what I'm doing. Constantine is nearly as old as you, Victor pointed out. And he's been training specifically to kill you. This won't be an easy fight. Nothing worth doing ever is. Gideon's tone held finality. But I'll win. I have to. Because of her, Gemma realized. Because the bond meant he had something to protect now, something to lose. The knowledge sat heavy in her chest. When will the challenge happen? She asked. Soon, Lucian said. Victor's spies say Constantine is nearly ready. He's been feeding heavily, building his strength. It could be as early as tomorrow night. Tomorrow. Gemma's hands curled into fists. The thought of Gideon fighting, possibly dying, made her feel physically ill. "I want to be there," she said, "when it happens." All 4 vampires turned to stare at her. Gideon's hand tightened on her back. "Gemma, no. You said I'm your partner in this bond," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. "You said I'm important in vampire society now. If that's true, then I should be there. I should see this through with you." "It's going to be violent," Gideon warned. "Vampire duels are not civilized affairs. There's blood and pain and—" "I don't care." She reached up and took his face between her hands, forcing him to look at her. "I'm not going to hide in my room while you risk your life. I can't do that, Gideon, so either you let me come willingly or I'll find a way to be there anyway." Silence. Then Victor said, "I like her." Seraphine laughed softly. "So do I. She's got spine." Gideon stared at Gemma for a long moment, and she saw the war in his eyes. He wanted to protect her, to keep her from witnessing the violence. But he also respected her enough to understand her need to be there. "Fine," he said at last. "But you'll be in the safeguarded area, behind wards, with guards. Non-negotiable." "Agreed." He pulled her hands from his face but didn't let go, holding them between his own. "You're going to drive me mad, you know that?" "Probably," she said with a small smile. "But you said you wanted everything. That includes the maddening parts." His eyes softened. "Yes, it does." Lucian cleared his throat. "I hate to interrupt what is clearly a moment, but we should discuss strategy. If Constantine challenges tomorrow, we need to be prepared." The next hour passed in a blur of tactical discussion. Gemma listened as the vampires debated Constantine's likely fighting style, his strengths and weaknesses, the best ways to counter his attacks. Gideon participated calmly, his strategic mind evident in every suggestion. But Gemma felt his worry through the bond, a low hum of tension he couldn't quite hide. When the meeting finally ended, Seraphine approached Gemma. "May I speak with you privately?" Gemma glanced at Gideon, who nodded. "I'll wait in the hall." Once the men had left, Seraphine settled into the chair beside Gemma. "You care for him," she said. "It wasn't a question. I barely know him." "That's not what I asked." Seraphine's expression was kind. "Gemma, I've known Gideon for 150 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. We've only just bonded. It could be the magic making him feel that way. The magic creates a connection, but it doesn't create emotions. What Gideon feels for you is real." Seraphine leaned forward. "And I think what you feel for him is real too, even if you're afraid to admit it." Gemma's throat tightened. "Everything is happening so fast. Yesterday I was just a graduate student worried about finals. Today I'm bonded to a vampire king and watching him prepare for a duel to the death. I don't know how to process any of this." "You don't have to process it all at once." Seraphine reached over and squeezed her hand. "Just focus on what you know for certain. You made a choice to save your sister. You formed a bond with Gideon. And now you're here, trying to find your place in a world you never knew existed. That's more than enough for now. What if he loses tomorrow?" The fear came tumbling out. "What if Constantine kills him? Then Constantine becomes king, and you'll be at his mercy," Seraphine said bluntly. "The bond won't transfer, but it also won't dissolve until one of you dies. You'd be tied to a dead king, which would make you an object of curiosity at best, a target at worst. Constantine would likely try to eliminate you to remove any potential challenge from Gideon's supporters." The words were harsh, but Gemma appreciated the honesty. "So I need Gideon to win." "We all need Gideon to win. He's been a good king, a fair king. Constantine would undo 2 centuries of progress in a matter of months." Seraphine's expression turned fierce. "Which is why we're going to make sure Gideon survives. And you, Gemma Lyndon, are part of that plan." "How?" "You're his bondmate. Your presence will give him strength. Something to fight for beyond duty and tradition. When he steps into that dueling circle tomorrow, he'll be fighting for you, for the life you might build together. That's powerful motivation. Gemma thought about that as Seraphine left. When Gideon returned, she stood and walked straight into his arms. He caught her reflexively, surprise flickering across his face. "Gemma?" She pressed her face against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. The bond pulsed between them, warm and grounding. "You have to win tomorrow," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "You have to." His arms came around her, holding her close. "I will. Promise me." "I can't promise." "Promise me, Gideon." She pulled back enough to look up at him. "I didn't come this far, risk this much, just to lose you to some power-hungry traditionalist. So promise me you'll do everything you can to win. Promise me you'll come back." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I promise," he said quietly. "I'll come back to you, Gemma. I swear it." She kissed him. She didn't plan it, didn't think about it. She just rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his, needing to seal the promise with something more than words. For a heartbeat, Gideon went still. Then he kissed her back, his arms tightening around her, and the bond between them flared bright enough to steal her breath. His lips were cool but not cold, gentle but not tentative. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was everything he'd been waiting for. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "I thought you didn't know what you wanted," he said, his voice rough. "Maybe I'm figuring it out," she whispered. "Maybe I'm falling for you, Gideon Winterbourne, and maybe that terrifies me, but I'm doing it anyway." His laugh was shaky. "I fell for you the moment you walked into my court and demanded I save your sister. You were so fierce, so full of love. How could I not fall for that?" "Then fight for this tomorrow," she said. "Fight for us, because I think we could have something incredible if you survive." "Then I'll survive." He kissed her again, softer this time. "I'll survive, and we'll build something incredible together." The challenge came at midnight the next day. Gemma stood in the warded observation area, her hands gripping the railing, as vampires from across the Eastern Territories filled the massive underground arena. The space reminded her of a Roman Colosseum, circular and tiered, with a flat dueling circle in the center, marked by ancient runes that glowed with soft blue light. Gideon stood on one side of the circle, dressed in black from head to toe. He'd braided his white hair back from his face, revealing the sharp angles of his features. He looked every inch the warrior king. Across from him stood Constantine. He was slightly shorter than Gideon, but broader, with white hair cropped close to his skull and scars crisscrossing his pale skin. His smile was cruel as he looked at Gideon. 200 years you've held this throne," Constantine called out. 200 years of weakness and coddling humans. Tonight, that ends. "If you wanted my throne, you could have simply challenged me," Gideon replied, his voice carrying easily through the arena. "Instead, you attacked an innocent girl to make your point. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of king you'd be. That girl served her purpose. She brought your new pet to you." Constantine's gaze flicked to Gemma, and she felt ice crawl down her spine. "Pretty thing. I look forward to meeting her properly after I've torn your head from your shoulders." Gemma felt Gideon's rage pulse through the bond. Victor, standing guard beside her, put a warning hand on her shoulder. "Don't react," he murmured. "That's what Constantine wants. He's trying to provoke Gideon into fighting angry." "Is it working?" "No. Gideon's too disciplined for that." But Victor's expression was tense. "Still, this is going to be brutal. Are you sure you want to watch?" "I'm sure." An elderly vampire stepped into the center of the circle. "The challenge has been invoked. The combat will continue until one combatant yields or dies. No outside interference will be tolerated. Do both combatants understand these terms?" "I do," Gideon said. "As do I," Constantine agreed. "Then begin." The elder vampire vanished from the circle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Constantine moved. He was fast, faster than Gemma's eyes could track. 1 second he was across the circle, the next he was on Gideon, claws extended, going for the throat. Gideon blocked the attack and countered with a strike that sent Constantine staggering back. The fight was nothing like the choreographed battles Gemma had seen in movies. It was vicious and raw, two predators trying to kill each other with fang and claw. Blood flew, bone cracked. The sound of it echoed through the arena. Gemma's hands tightened on the railing until her knuckles went white. She felt every blow Gideon took through the bond, sharp spikes of pain that made her gasp. But she also felt his determination, his focus, his absolute refusal to lose. Constantine was strong and brutal, all raw power. But Gideon was faster, more controlled. He turned Constantine's strength against him, dodging attacks and countering with surgical precision. But he was also tiring. Gemma could feel it through the bond, the way his muscles burned, the way his reactions slowed incrementally with each exchange. Constantine felt it too. His cruel smile widened. "You're getting old, Winterbourne," he taunted. "Soft." "I'm getting smart," Gideon corrected. "You've been fighting like a brawler, all muscle, no strategy. That works on young vampires, not on me." He proved his point by feinting left, then striking right. His claws caught Constantine across the face, tearing deep furrows through skin. Constantine howled and lunged, but Gideon was already moving. He swept Constantine's legs out from under him and brought his fist down in a hammer blow that cracked the stone floor. Constantine rolled away, blood streaming from his face. "I'll kill you," he snarled, "and then I'll kill your human pet. Maybe I'll even turn her, make her watch as I undo everything you've built." Gemma felt Gideon's rage flare bright and hot through the bond. But instead of charging in recklessly, he took a breath and centered himself. "You won't touch her," he said, his voice deadly calm. "You won't touch anyone I protect ever again." He moved then, and Gemma had never seen anything so beautiful or terrible. Gideon became a blur of motion, his attacks flowing one into the next with perfect fluidity. Constantine tried to defend, tried to counter, but he couldn't keep up. Within seconds, Gideon had him on the defensive. Within a minute, he had Constantine on his knees. Gideon's hand wrapped around Constantine's throat, claws digging in deep enough to draw blood. The arena fell silent. "Yield," Gideon said. Constantine's eyes blazed with hatred. "Never." "Then die." Gideon's claws tightened. "I gave you the chance to end this honorably." "Wait!" The shout came from the audience. A vampire stepped forward, elderly and draped in robes that marked her as a council member. "Constantine yields. On behalf of the traditionalist faction, we yield this challenge." Constantine made a strangled sound of protest, but the elder vampire continued. "We have seen enough. Gideon Winterbourne has proven his strength, his worthiness, and his control. The challenge is satisfied." Gideon looked at the elder, then at Constantine, then back at the elder. Slowly, he released his grip on Constantine's throat. "The council recognizes the outcome?" he asked. "The council recognizes it," she confirmed. "The challenge is done. Constantine's claim to the throne is forfeit." Constantine collapsed to the stone, coughing and gasping. Gideon stood over him for a moment, then turned and walked away. His eyes found Gemma in the observation area, and even across the distance, she felt his relief pulse through the bond. He was alive. He'd won. Victor opened the gate to the observation area, and Gemma ran. She dodged vampires, ignored the protocol, ignored everything except the need to get to Gideon. When she reached him, she threw her arms around his neck, not caring that he was covered in blood and sweat. "You did it!" she gasped. "You won!" "I told you I would." His arms came around her, holding her tight enough that she could barely breathe. "I told you I'd come back." She pulled back just far enough to see his face. He had cuts and bruises already healing, blood on his clothes and in his hair, but his eyes were clear and warm and alive. "I was so scared," she admitted. "So was I." He cupped her face in his hands. "But I had something to fight for. Someone to come back to." She kissed him, there in the center of the arena with hundreds of vampires watching, and she didn't care. All that mattered was that he was alive, that they'd survived, that they had a chance to build the something incredible he'd promised. When they finally broke apart, the arena erupted in cheers. Gideon laughed against her lips, a sound of pure relief and joy. "Come on," he murmured. "Let's get out of here." The next week passed in a blur. Grace was released from the hospital and moved into the secured apartment Gideon had arranged. Gemma visited her every day, and gradually, Grace's color returned, her strength rebuilt. The doctors couldn't explain her recovery, but they didn't need to. Gemma knew the truth. Constantine and his closest supporters were exiled from the eastern territories, sent to wander the other kingdoms with the mark of their defeat. The council met to discuss Gideon's reforms, and with the traditionalist faction weakened, many of his proposed changes finally passed. And Gemma learned what it meant to be bonded to a vampire king. She spent her days learning vampire history and politics from Seraphine. She trained in self-defense with Victor, who turned out to be a patient teacher despite his gruff exterior. She attended court functions on Gideon's arm, slowly growing accustomed to the attention and the whispers. But her favorite times were the nights she spent alone with Gideon in his chambers. They talked for hours, learning each other's stories. He told her about his human life in the 18th century, about being turned by a vampire who'd wanted a companion and never bothered to ask permission, about clawing his way up through vampire society until he'd won the throne 200 years ago. She told him about growing up with Grace, about losing their parents in a car accident when Gemma was 20 and Grace was just 14, about putting herself through college while raising her sister, sacrificing her own dreams to make sure Grace had a chance at a better life. "That's why you didn't hesitate," Gideon said one night as they lay curled together in his massive bed. "When I told you the cost of saving Grace, you didn't even think about it, because you've been sacrificing for her your whole life." "She's my sister," Gemma said simply. "That's what family does." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You're extraordinary, you know that?" "I'm really not. I'm just a girl who stumbled into a vampire court and somehow ended up with a king." "No." He tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "You're the woman who walked into my court without fear, who stood up to me, who's faced everything this world has thrown at you with courage and grace. You're the woman I'm falling more in love with every single day." Her breath caught. "You love me?" "Desperately," he admitted. "I know it's fast. I know we're still learning each other. But yes, Gemma, I love you." Tears pricked her eyes. "I love you too. It's terrifying and probably crazy, but I do. I love you, Gideon." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and the bond between them sang with shared emotion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Not because of the bond, not because of duty, but because you want to. Stay with me, Gemma." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll stay." But as the weeks passed, Gemma became aware of a growing problem. She was aging. It was barely noticeable now, just the natural progression of time, but it would become a problem eventually. Gideon would remain unchanged for centuries, maybe millennia, while she grew old and died within decades. The thought of leaving him, of leaving Grace, of losing the life she'd built here, made her chest ache. But she didn't know what to do about it. Seraphine noticed first. She found Gemma in the library one afternoon, staring at a book on vampire physiology without really reading it. "You're thinking about mortality," Seraphine said, settling into the chair across from her. Gemma didn't bother denying it. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been where you are." Seraphine's expression was kind. "I was human once, you know. A very long time ago." Gemma blinked. "You were?" "I was turned in 1692 during the witch trials in Salem. A vampire saved me from being burned and offered me a choice: die as a human or live forever as one of them." She smiled faintly. "I chose life. I've never regretted it." "But it's such a huge decision." "It is," Seraphine agreed, "which is why you shouldn't make it lightly. Talk to Gideon. Tell him what you're thinking. He'll understand." That night, Gemma brought it up. They were in his chambers again, Gideon reading reports while she sketched in a notebook, a hobby she'd rediscovered now that her days weren't consumed by worry over Grace. "Gideon," she said quietly, "can we talk about something?" He set down his papers immediately. "Of course. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly. I'm just thinking about the future. Our future. She set down her pencil. You're going to live for centuries, maybe forever, and I'm going to be dead in 50 or 60 years if I'm lucky. That doesn't seem like much of a partnership. Understanding flickered in his eyes. You're thinking about turning. I don't know what I'm thinking, she admitted. I love my humanity. I love being alive in the way humans are alive. But I also love you, and the thought of leaving you. Her voice wavered. I don't want to lose this, Gideon. I don't want to lose us. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. Gemma, listen to me. I will never, ever pressure you to turn. That decision has to be yours and yours alone. If you choose to remain human, then I'll cherish every year, every day, every moment we have together. And when you're gone, I'll mourn you for the rest of my existence and count myself lucky to have known you at all. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But what if I want to stay? What if I want forever with you? His thumb brushed away her tears. Then I'll turn you, and I'll spend forever showing you how much you mean to me. But you have to be sure, Gemma. Turning is irreversible. You'd be giving up sunlight, giving up aging, giving up so many things that make you human. That's not a decision to make lightly. I know. She leaned into his touch. Can I have time to think about it? You can have all the time you need, he promised. Years if you want them. This is your choice, now and always. She made her decision 3 months later, on the night of Grace's 20th birthday. They'd thrown a party in Grace's new apartment, inviting her college friends and a few of the friendlier vampires from the court. Gemma watched her sister laugh and dance, healthy and happy and gloriously alive, and felt something settle in her chest. Grace found her later, out on the balcony overlooking the city. Hey, Grace said, sliding an arm around Gemma's waist. You okay? I'm perfect, Gemma said, meaning it. You look so happy, Grace. I am happy, thanks to you. Grace squeezed her. You saved my life, Gem. You gave up everything for me. I didn't give up anything, Gemma corrected. I found something, someone, a whole new life I never expected. Grace studied her face in the light spilling from the apartment. You're going to do it, aren't you? You're going to let him turn you. How did you know? Because I know you. Grace smiled. And because I've seen the way you look at him, the way he looks at you. That's not something you give up after 50 years, Gem. That's forever kind of love. Are you okay with it? If I become what he is? Are you kidding? You saved my life. If becoming a vampire means you get to be happy and in love for the rest of eternity, then I'm thrilled for you. Grace's expression turned serious. Just promise me you'll still be my sister, that you won't forget about me when you're all immortal and powerful. Never, Gemma said fiercely. You're my sister. That doesn't change, no matter what I become. They hugged on the balcony while the party continued inside, and Gemma felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was the choice she wanted to make. Not because she had to, not because anyone was pressuring her, but because she'd found something worth holding on to forever. She told Gideon that night, back in his chambers. I want to turn, she said without preamble. I want to spend forever with you. He'd gone very still. Are you certain? Completely certain. I've thought about it, talked to Seraphine, talked to Grace. This is what I want, Gideon. I want forever with you. You'll lose the sun, he warned. You'll lose the ability to age, to have children the natural way to... I know what I'll lose, she interrupted gently. And I know what I'll gain. You, forever. A life in a world I'm only beginning to understand. The chance to actually make a difference in vampire society, to help you with your reforms. That's worth more to me than sunlight. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I love you, he said against her hair. I love you so much it terrifies me. Then turn me, she whispered. Make me yours in every way possible. He did, that very night. It was intimate and strange and painful and beautiful all at once. His bite was gentle, drawing her blood slowly until she felt light-headed and distant. Then he bit his own wrist and pressed it to her lips. "Drink," he murmured. "Drink and cross over to me." His blood was nothing like she'd expected. It tasted of copper and darkness and power, and it burned going down like swallowing starlight. She drank until he pulled away, and then the world went black. When she woke 3 nights later, everything had changed. Colors were sharper, sounds were clearer. She could hear Gideon's heartbeat from across the room, smell the human guards 3 floors away. Her body felt different, stronger and faster, and more coordinated than it had ever been. And when she looked in the mirror, she saw a stranger looking back. Pale skin, white blonde hair, eyes that held a faint silver glow. "Beautiful," Gideon said, appearing behind her in the reflection. "You're beautiful, Gemma." She turned to face him, and for the first time she saw him clearly. Not just his face, but the power radiating from him, the age and strength that made him king. And beneath it all, the love he felt for her, bright and warm and absolutely certain. "I can feel everything," she said in wonder. "You'll learn to control it, to filter the sensations. But yes, the world is much bigger when you're one of us." He took her hand. "How do you feel?" "Like myself," she realized. "Just more. Is that strange?" "Not at all. You're still Gemma. You've just become the best possible version of yourself." He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Welcome to immortality, my love." The months that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment. Gemma learned to hunt humanely, from willing donors that Gideon's organization maintained, and to control her new strength. She learned to navigate vampire society with Seraphine's guidance, and to defend herself in training sessions with Victor that were now much more evenly matched. And she learned what it meant to be not just bonded to a king, but to be his equal. Gideon included her in council meetings, asked her opinion on policy decisions, treated her as a true partner in every sense. Grace adjusted to having a vampire sister with remarkable ease. "You're still you," she said during one of Gemma's visits. "You still fuss over me, still worry too much, still tell terrible jokes. The pale skin and glowy eyes are just window dressing." "I'm glad you think so," Gemma said, relieved. She'd been worried Grace would be frightened or disturbed by the change. "Although," Grace added thoughtfully, "you're going to have to teach me how to do my makeup like yours. Your cheekbones are ridiculously unfair now." Gemma laughed and hugged her sister, grateful beyond words that Grace was still part of her life. A year after her turning, Gideon proposed. Not with words, but with actions. He appeared in their chambers one evening carrying a small velvet box. "I know we're already bonded," he said, kneeling before her in a gesture that sent her heart racing. "I know vampire law considers us bound in every way that matters, but I want to honor your human traditions too. I want to marry you, Gemma Lyndon. Will you be my wife, in addition to being my bondmate?" She pulled him to his feet and kissed him breathless. "Yes," she said when they finally broke apart. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." The wedding was a blend of vampire tradition and human custom, held in the court's grand hall with Grace as Gemma's maid of honor and Victor as Gideon's best man. Vampires and humans mingled together, celebrating the union of their king with the woman who'd walked fearlessly into their world. When Gideon kissed his bride, the bond between them blazed bright enough that several vampires claimed they could actually see it, a thread of light connecting their hearts. They honeymooned in Scotland, in the fortress of the former king who'd abdicated in Gideon's favor. He was a gruff, ancient vampire named Alistair, who took one look at Gemma and pronounced her a vast improvement over that brooding fool I left in charge. "I'm standing right here," Gideon said with exaggerated patience. "I know, that's why I said it." Alistair turned to Gemma. "You'll do well together. He needs someone to remind him he's allowed to be happy." "I'll do my best," Gemma promised. They spent 2 weeks in the Scottish Highlands, learning each other in the ways that newlyweds do. Gemma discovered she loved immortality, loved the strength and power that came with being vampire. But more than that, she loved the life she was building with Gideon. When they returned to the court, it was to news that the Vampire Council had officially recognized their marriage and recommended that Gemma be given a title befitting her status. Within the month, she was formally acknowledged as Queen of the Eastern Territories, Gideon's equal partner in ruling. "How does it feel?" Seraphine asked at the coronation ceremony. "Being queen?" "Terrifying," Gemma admitted. "But right. Like this is where I'm supposed to be." "That's because it is," Seraphine said with a smile. "You and Gideon are going to do great things together. I can feel it." She was right. Over the years that followed, Gideon and Gemma worked together to transform vampire society in the Eastern Territories. They established strict rules against harming humans without consent. They created systems for vampires and humans to coexist peacefully. They opened their court to diplomats from other territories, spreading their reforms through example. And through it all, their bond only grew stronger. They were partners in every sense, lovers and friends and allies, facing the challenges of immortality side by side. Grace remained a constant in their lives. She graduated from college, started a career in environmental law, and eventually married a kind man named James who took the whole vampire-in-laws thing in stride. When Grace and James had children, Gemma and Gideon became the world's most unusual aunt and uncle, doting on the babies and teaching them that vampires were just people with different dietary requirements. On the night of Grace's 30th birthday, as they celebrated in her suburban home with children running underfoot and laughter filling the air, Grace pulled Gemma aside. "I know I've said this before," Grace said, "but thank you for saving my life, for giving me all of this." She gestured to the party, to James, to her children. "You never have to thank me," Gemma said. "You're my sister. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. I know you would. That's what makes you the best person I know." Grace squeezed her hand. "And I'm so glad you found Gideon, that you found happiness. You deserve it, Gem." Later that night, as Gemma and Gideon drove back to the court through streets lit by street lamps and starlight, Gemma thought about how much her life had changed. 2 years ago, she'd been a desperate grad student willing to do anything to save her sister. Now she was a vampire queen, immortal and powerful, ruling a territory alongside the man she loved more than she'd thought possible. "What are you thinking about?" Gideon asked, sensing her contemplation through the bond. "Just how strange life is," she said. "How one night, one decision, can change everything." "Do you regret it?" There was no insecurity in his voice, just curiosity, not for a second. She reached over and took his hand. "I walked into your court begging you to let my sister live. You told me the price was belonging to you, and somehow that price became the best thing that ever happened to me." He lifted her hand to his lips. "The best thing that ever happened to both of us," he corrected. "I've spent centuries ruling alone, Gemma. Now I have you, and I finally understand what I was missing. Partnership, love, a reason to keep fighting for a better world." "Then let's keep fighting," she said. "For centuries, for millennia. Whatever it takes." "Together," he agreed. They drove through the night, two immortals bound by blood and magic and love, heading home to the underground court where their people waited. And for the first time in his long existence, Gideon Winterbourne looked toward the future not with lonely determination, but with joy, because he wasn't facing eternity alone anymore. He had Gemma by his side, his partner, his queen, his love, and that made all the difference. The years stretched ahead of them like an open road, full of possibility and promise. They would face challenges, certainly. There would be other Constantines, other threats, other battles to fight. But they would face them together, the way they'd faced everything since that first night when Gemma had crashed into Gideon's world and changed it forever. And somewhere in that future, as they worked to bridge the gap between human and vampire, as they raised a society built on cooperation rather than fear, they would look back on this moment and remember. Remember the bargain that had brought them together. Remember the bond that had made them partners. Remember the love that had turned that partnership into something eternal. She had begged him to let her sister live. He had said only if she belonged to him, and in the end, that belonging had set them both free.